Under surveillance this morning, Trump giving final notice.
Sending letters out on Monday having to do with the trade deals. It could be 12, maybe 15. Some will go out on Tuesday and Wednesday, and we've made deals also. So we're going to have a combination of letters, and some deals have been made. I think we'll have most countries done by July 9th. Yeah. Either a letter or a deal.
So here's the latest this morning. President Donald Trump saying the U.S. will send letters to trade partners starting at noon today, as his pause on higher tariffs is set to expire on Wednesday. Joining us now from the nation's capital is Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall. Tyler, a lot of people waking up in this market this morning with one question after all the comments over the weekend. Just what is the actual deadline?
Yeah. Hey, John. Good morning. Well, the administration has signaled that perhaps there's some leeway here in terms of a perhaps 3-week extension. Administration officials have said that they're going to send out the letters in the coming days, but the levies aren't going to go into effect until August 1st. And we heard from the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in an interview over the weekend saying that the administration's playbook is what he called maximum pressure, that they're hoping by sending these letters that will light a fire under the trading partners to essentially put their best offer on the table. Now, President Trump said that these letters are going out to 12 to 15 of our trading partners. We know the White House was negotiating over the holiday weekend with officials from economies that have long been prioritized, including South Korea, Japan, India, the European Union. We should also probably note that officials from Vietnam were here in Washington. Even though we've already gotten an announcement of a framework agreement, it's clear that things are fluid and they're still ironing out the details. I will also add that the Treasury Secretary said that at the end of the day, they're likely to send 100 letters or so, because that will include some of those smaller countries that don't do as much trade with the U.S. and are going to face probably that 10% baseline tariff. But I bring it up because it probably previews a little bit of the messaging that we're going to hear out of the White House in the coming days, with the Treasury Secretary saying that these would basically amount to the so-called deals, even though it doesn't appear a lot of negotiating was done, because, John, these are the rates they're going to have to pay if they want to do business with the U.S.
Tyler, do you have a sense of the pecking order right now? Who actually is going to get a deal by the 9th? That is a framework outline like we saw potentially that the U.S. did with the United Kingdom?
Well, it's actually, Anne-Marie, been really interesting to see how some of these economies that have been prioritized, those economies in Asia that are geographically close to China, have sort of been shifting in terms of the order. Take Japan, for example, with President Trump has recently ramped up his threats against because of some of the sticking points in the negotiations there, particularly when it comes to the sector-specific tariffs related to autos. We're seeing sort of the same messaging when it comes to India. Of course, President Trump ramped up his comments and his threats against any nation he says are aligning with anti-American policies of BRICS countries after a summit of those nations over the weekend. But India has also said that they're prepared to launch retaliatory tariffs, something that the administration doesn't want to see and likely isn't liking the sound of that, particularly when it does come to also negotiating those auto tariffs. So that's been a really interesting dynamic. These are the countries that we were expecting agreements, but it is clear that there's still a lot of issues that they need to work out.
Tyler Kendall with the latest. Tyler, thank you, down in Washington, D.C. Anne-Marie, still trying to figure out who's at the front of the line here and who's at the back. This is the latest from Europe this morning, from the EU Commission. The President, Anne von der Leyen, the EU Commission President, spoke by phone over the weekend.
Yep, the EU is still trying to work towards this Wednesday deadline. They want to get a framework in place when it comes to the agreement. They don't want to be lingering when it comes to the line of who's in the front of the queue. What's so interesting is that the European Union seemed to be on the back foot with this administration, but the last 3 weeks or so, it really changed in terms of the outreach and what they were willing to agree to. Remember, it was just 2 weeks ago that they said if there was a 10% across the line base when it comes to tariffs, there was going to be reciprocity from Brussels on Washington. And then all of a sudden, that disappeared, that evaporated, and now they seem to be willing to be able to take more, not have as many concessions.
This from the Commission just moments ago. The EU still working towards the July 9th deadline for a trade deal with the United States.